In this video, we are going to learn how to use relative clauses to connect two sentences. Exciting. So, what are relative clauses? Well, we use relative clauses to combine two sentences into one complex sentence. And we use relative pronouns to replace repeated information in those two sentences. Here are the relative pronouns we will look at today: who, which, that, whose, where, and when. Let's get started. Our first relative pronoun is who, and we use who to refer to people. Let's start with our first example. Hamid is an Omani teenager, and like most Omani teenagers, Hamid likes football. Like he really likes football. Now, in these two sentences, I have Hamid repeated, which is a little boring. So I can use who to combine these into one more interesting, complex sentence. Hamid is an Omani teenager who likes football. Who likes football is my relative clause. My relative pronoun who refers to my subject, Hamid, and because that's a person, that's why I'm using who. Let's look at our next relative pronoun, which. We use which for things. So, Hamid has a football. Good for you, Hamid. It was signed by Messi? Wow, that's exciting. Now, in these two sentences, my repeated information is about the football. Instead of having this as two separate sentences, I can remove that full stop and replace it with which to create a complex relative clause. Hamid has a football which was signed by Messi. Here in my relative clause, which was signed by Messi, the which refers to football. Because it's a thing, that's why I'm using which. Our next relative pronoun, that, is also used for things. So, Hamid watched a match. That's exciting. It inspired him to be a player. Good job, Hamid. Now, here in my two sentences, match and it is my repeated information. And again, I'm talking about match, which is a thing. So I can use that to create one complex sentence. Hamid watched a match. That inspired him to be a player. Our next relative pronoun, whose, is used to refer to possessions of people. Here's our example. Hamid has a coach. That looks like a good coach. The coach's advice helps him. Wow, helped him a lot. Now here we have coach and coaches as our repeated information. So to combine this into one sentence, I need to remove that second coach and replace it with whose to show that the advice belongs to the coach. Hamid has a coach and the coach's whose advice helps him. It shows me that the advice belongs to the coach. Our next relative pronoun is where, and where is used for places. So Hamid practices at the park. Looks like a pretty good park. He meets his friends at the park. Nice. Got some exciting friends there. Now, here we have park repeated in both of these sentences. So that tells me that I can combine them into one sentence using a relative clause. And I'm going to use the relative pronoun where because we're talking about the place. Hamid practices at the park where he meets his friends. Our last relative pronoun is when, and when is used for time. Hamid has to wake up early every morning to get to practice. So Hamid won his first match. Wow, that's an exciting trophy. He was 10 years old at the time. Good job, Hamid. Now here, 10 years old tells me we're talking about time. And I also have this phrase at the time at the end. That's going to tell me that I can, instead of having this as two separate sentences, combine them into one sentence using when. Hamid won his first match when he was 10 years old. So let's review our relative clauses. We use relative clauses to combine two sentences into one complex sentence using relative pronouns to replace the repeated information. And our relative pronouns again, who, which, that, whose, where, and when. Can you remember what each of the relative pronouns is used? I hope so. Good luck and enjoy combining sentences using relative clauses.